So this presentation is about participles. It's going to go quickly, so if you need to pause, please do and rewatch. Participles, super important topic in Latin. We're going to come in a couple different flavors here. There's tenses and there's voices. So tenses are present, happening now, perfect, in the past, and future, about to happen, right? Active and passive are voices. Active means doing, passive means receiving. So if you notice with these active participle translations here, verbing and about to verb, whatever's being described by those words is doing the action. It is verbing or it is about to verb. Whereas passive is receiving. So having been verbed and must be verbed, those are receiving the action, whether in the past or the future. So those are the four kinds of participles you need to know: present active, perfect passive, future active, and future passive. Very, very important. You learned a couple of them last year, so a couple new ones. These X's, these boxes where the X's are, you don't need to know them. They don't exist. Yay. Verbal adjectives. Let's remember that participles do show action like verbs, but they also describe nouns. So the river flowing wildly past my house is difficult to cross. Flowing shows action like a verb, but it is an adjective describing the river. What kind of river is it? Or the river that's flowing wildly past my house. Likewise, what else can you do but praise a statue sculpted or having been sculpted by Bernini? Sculpted is the participle, just like flowing was, and sculpted shows an action like a verb, sculpting, but it's an adjective describing the statue. What kind of statue is it? A statue sculpted by Bernini. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward here, that they are verbal adjectives. Have to agree with nouns in case, number, and gender. So the first one is present active participle, which you guys already know. Present active participles are translated verbing. But how do we form them? Well, pretty easy. We just go to the, for the nominative singular form, we go to the present stem and we add ns. So when I say nominative singular, I just mean that's what the participle will look like when it's describing a nominative singular noun as verbing. So for instance, in this picture, you got me eating a sandwich here. If you were to describe Mr. Russo with a nominative singular, you'd say Mr. Russo eating the sandwich, and you would take the present stem and add ns to it, which we'll see in a second. For the other cases and numbers for this participle, you take the present stem again, except instead of ns, it's nt, and then a third declension ending. Now, for the genitive, that third declension ending is is, so it's ins, intus. But like I said, declines like third declension adjectives, so you're going to use all third declension endings here. So let's take the verb to eat, consumo, consumere, consumsi, consumtus, and take the present stem, which is consume. You just add ns to make it the nominative singular form of that participle. So that was how you would describe me in this picture. Consumes the kibum, eating the food. Consumentis would be the genitive, consumenti would be dative, consumentem accusative, consumente would be the ablative. Sometimes it's an I instead of an E, that ablative ending. The only weirdness you have to watch out for, I'm going to move my little face around here in the bottom, is fourth conjugation verbs. They add an E before the ns or the nt. So eanes, entis, ent, stuff like that. Moving on, perfect passive participles you're also familiar with. Perfect passive participles are translated verbed or having been verbed. In this case, we're describing the sandwich as having been verbed or having been eaten. How do you form them? The fourth principal part. Easy as that. And they use first and second declension endings. They are first and second declension adjectives. So if I was trying to take the verb to eat and get the participle from it, it's consumtus, having been eaten. When I actually write it out, though, I'll probably say consumtus a That us a endings, those endings show me that it can have any first or second declension endings. Okay? So if I was describing the food here as having been eaten, I would say kibus consumptus a magistro Russo, having been eaten by Mr. Russo. Future active participles is a little new, but just to go over quickly, it's pretty easy. It's the future, so you have to say about to verb. How to form it? You go to the fourth principal part again. You take off the US. Instead of US, you say urus. It's that UR thing you're really looking for there, that ending, UR US. Just like the last participle, it declines like a first/second declension adjective, so it will use any first or second declension endings. So taking the verb to eat again, if you want to get the future active participle from this, consumptus is the fourth principal part. Take off the us, so consumt, and you add urus to that. Consumpturus and you would translate that participle about to eat. So I would use this participle to describe myself in the picture. Magister Russo, consumpturus cibum erat litus. Yeah, Mr. Russo, about to eat food, was happy. Last one, future passive participles. Just be aware that this is in the future and it's getting verb, right? Passive is receiving. But this in Latin, it carries with it this special notion of obligation or necessity, right? Something has to happen. Something must be verbed in the future. So that's why I have this threatening looking timer and me looking at the sandwich, because I have to eat that sandwich. It must be eaten. So that's, if I was describing the sandwich with the future passive participle, it would be must be eaten. So how to form it, guys? This you actually have to go back to the present stem for this one. That's a little tricky maybe, but just memorize it. Present stem plus indus. So nd is the key there, ndus. Just like the last couple participles, uses first and second declension endings. So you take consumo, consumere, consumsi, consumptus again. The stem is consume, the present stem that is, and then you just add indus to that, consumendus. Again, I'm using the us endings to indicate that it can use any first or second declension endings. If you saw this describing something, you'd have to say it must be eaten. So if I said cibus consumendus est, the food must be eaten. The only weirdness you have to look out for here is, again, in the fourth conjugation verbs, they have to add that e in again, iendus. Add the e in before the nd. One last overview, just looking at this again, this chart, very important. Verbing for the present active, having been verbed for the perfect passive. Keep moving my face around here. Future is about to verb, and future passive is must be verbed. And there's little cues there to remind you of how to form each of those. Hopefully that makes sense.